from Ephesians 2:8. For it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and this not from yourselves. It is the gift of God. Please like, share, and subscribe for additional updates. Part 1, Overview of Ephesians 2:8. A well-known Bible verse with great significance in Christian theology is Ephesians 2:8. It says, "You have been rescued by grace through faith. Furthermore, this is a gift from God. It is not anything you did." This verse highlights the importance of God's grace and the requirement for faith in order to be saved, summarizing the central message of Christianity. We will examine this verse's meaning and ramifications in further detail from a Christian perspective in this examination. Part 2, Comprehending the Grace and Salvation of God. Ephesians 2:8's opening section emphasizes the essential idea of God's grace in the process of salvation. In Christian theology, the term grace describes God's unmerited and unearned favor toward humans. Each and every person can experience salvation because of God's grace. The passage makes it clear that salvation is not something that can be attained via good works or human merit. It is a gift freely provided by God rather than something we have earned. This idea is consistent with the scriptural teaching that no one can be saved or gain entry into paradise by their own goodness. Romans 3:20, Ephesians 2:9. Despite our sinful nature, God's grace is an evidence of His unwavering love and mercy for us. It's a divine act of forgiveness and kindness that makes it possible for people to make peace with God. This conception of grace, which acknowledges the crucial part played by God's initiative and intervention in the process of salvation, is fundamental to Christian theology. Part 3, Faith's Significance for Salvation. Ephesians 2:8's second section highlights the significance of faith in the process of salvation. It implies that we appropriate God's gift of grace by way of faith when it says that salvation is obtained via faith. Christian theology defines faith as having confidence in, trust in, and dependence on God and His promises. Faith is an active reaction that entails giving one's life to God, not only a cerebral consent to a set of theories or beliefs. We accept our need for a Savior and put our faith in Jesus Christ, the source of redemption, via faith. The verse highlights the fact that faith is a reaction to God's favor rather than an effort or accomplishment of our own. It is a modest admission of our helplessness and gratitude for God's atoning act accomplished through Jesus Christ. This interpretation of faith emphasizes how crucial humility and submission are to the Christian life. Examining Ephesians 2:8. Ephesians 2:8 sums up the central idea of Christian redemption in a very elegant way. It highlights the fact that salvation is a gift from God, freely offered to people and obtained via faith. This stanza summarizes a number of crucial theological ideas that form the basis of Christian doctrine. First of all, Ephesians 2:8 highlights how crucial God's grace is to the process of salvation. This serves as a reminder to believers that salvation is not something that can be obtained or merited by human labor. It is only a gift from God, bestowed upon us in appreciation of His kindness and love for us. This interpretation of grace calls into question any idea of self-righteousness or self-sufficiency, serving as a constant reminder to Christians that God alone is the source of their salvation. As believers acknowledge their unworthiness and the extent of God's compassion and forgiveness, it promotes humility and appreciation. Second, Ephesians 2:8 emphasizes that salvation requires faith. The mechanism by which we accept and appropriate God's grace is through faith. It entails putting your faith, confidence, and trust in God and His promises. Faith is an active reaction that entails giving one's life to God rather than a passive acceptance of particular concepts. This interpretation of faith places a strong emphasis on how individual and interpersonal salvation is. Rather than limiting believers to following a prescribed set of religious rites or practices, it invites them to have a dynamic and transformational relationship with God. Faith eventually results in a life of obedience and discipleship and necessitates confidence in God's character and capacity to keep his promises. Finally, Ephesians 2:8 emphasizes how closely faith and God's grace are related. It highlights the fact that faith is a reaction to God's grace rather than an effort or accomplishment of our own. Believers who recognize that their faith is a gift from God are protected from bragging or self-righteousness by this insight. Christians are encouraged by Ephesians 2:8 to live amid the tension that exists between human accountability and God's sovereignty. Salvation requires a personal response of faith, even though it is totally dependent on God's grace. As God extends an invitation to humanity to partake in his divine plan of salvation, this tension draws attention to the mystery and beauty of his redeeming effort. To sum up, Ephesians 2:8 is very important to Christian theology. It summarizes the central theme of salvation, highlighting the importance of faith and the part played by God's grace. This verse calls believers to respond in faith by giving their life to God, reminding them of the unmerited goodness that he has shown them. Ephesians 2:8 is a potent reminder of God's kindness, compassion, and the ability of his grace to change the lives of believers.